What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hawk Talk on Melrose YouTube page, where we are going to talk some Hawks. But before we do that, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and share with your friends. That is all we ask, and let's roll. All right, here we go. Hawk Talk on Melrose. We have finally made it. It is game week. Joined today with not just one, but two people. Got Tyler here, of course, but we also got my brother Kolby live down in Nashville. We thought, what better way to kick off game week than to have Kolby back on this episode, and we are really excited. We have a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, what's going on, fellas? How's your night going?
I mean, we're one step closer to football, one day closer to football.
Oh,
And, I'm getting to that point where it's hard to focus on anything else. And just ready. We had a great kickoff this past weekend with some great games that on paper didn't look like they were going to be great games, and they turned out great. And I think that's just why we love college football so much, the unpredictability, and on any
yep,
given
exactly.
Saturday, stuff can happen. And so I'm fired up. I'm ready for another year of Iowa football and hopefully a little more positivity this year um, from all three of us and the fan base as a whole.
It's good to see Kolby's beautiful face on this podcast once again, and excited to hear his perspective as we, dive into not only the season, but obviously the Illinois State preview. So ready to get into it.
Let's start with the depth chart, and let's start with the defensive side of the ball first, because I think the offense is more like surprises for sure. Defensively, not really a whole lot besides TJ Hall being the starter. However, Kirk did say today at his press conference that he kind of said like it's still kind of up in the air. TJ Hall just has been more consistent. That's the reason why he is the number one starter, but it does sound like we will still see, which I figured we're going to see the other guys, John Nestor and Deshaun Lee, and then Jamari Harris on the other side. But other than that, not really much I really took from the defense. It's pretty kind of what I expected, and it's a damn good defense. I can confirm that. I think we can all confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at that depth chart, you think of veteran leadership. You look at the guys that decided to come back for one last ride, and it's really hard not to look at that defense and think, wow, this is an elite defense. I think, like you said, I had a couple. My two things was, yes, the TJ Hall on the one line. I do think that's going to be a position that can maybe ebb and flow throughout the year. Maybe some weeks TJ's locking it down. Maybe some weeks Nestor's locking it down. I think they're all pretty interchangeable at this point. And I think, Kirk's comments alluded to that today. TJ's the most consistent at this point. My two things, I'm excited to see. Well, I'm curious and excited to see where Cohen Entringer fits into this defense. I think that he's a guy that's going to be hard to keep off the field. I think coaches are extremely excited about him. He's back practicing full on. And then the obvious one, when you look at that depth chart, is our defensive tackle depth. It's a little scary, especially with Jeff Bowie out, which makes it sound, I think, till the end of October or mid-October before we get
I didn't
back.
realize that.
I think I either read that on Hawkeye Report or where that, I can't remember where that was from, but yeah, I think, that's a scary, the first two guys are NFL guys, but after that, it gets a little hairy. So we need to stay healthy at that position and hope that things keep the health up and be able to rotate some guys. And hopefully, the Jeremiah Pittmans of the world step up where they can give Yahweh and Aaron a breather when they need it. Outside of that, I think the defense looks as good as it's looked in years, and that's saying something. I mean, we've had an elite defense for now 5 years in a row, and to be able to bring a defense back that could be the best of the KF era is huge.
I think.
Yeah, not much more to, I just say not much more to add than that for me. Like you guys have mentioned, the defensive tackle depth, we'll see how that plays out. Like you said, Kolby, got to stay healthy, as much as possible. But this defense has the potential to be as good or if not better than last year. And, I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to be top tier for sure.
And one more note to add, I think it's also for all three of us is we're very curious and interested to see who steps into that pass rushing mold and is our pass rusher specialist. And I think that could be a Brian Allen, Max Lewin. Do those guys step up and become that guy, that spirit on the edges? And I think that's important. Last year, our sack production dipped, and can we get that back up to where it needs to be? Because sacks ultimately pressure creates interceptions, and last year interceptions were down as well. So it was an elite defense without the turnovers that we are accustomed to. So can we get back to that this year?
To the offensive side of the depth chart, for me, couple different things. Obviously, number one, Kamari Moulton, number one at running back. That was the biggest surprise. We'll get more into that, but seeing Reese Vanderzee, a true freshman, cracking the depth chart at wide receiver makes sense because we've heard a lot of buzz about him. And think about him, like he just came onto campus. He wasn't here during the summer because he was still playing baseball for his high school. So he came in right when camp started. And then Caden Weegan above Seth Anderson now, which that makes sense too, because Seth Anderson was out pretty much all of fall camp, which is very unfortunate. But and also Caden Weegan was having a good fall camp from what we have heard. And then Jacob Gill starting now at wide receiver, which I understand there's not that much talent. So it's not that hard to climb the depth chart, but that's pretty impressive too, to come in early summer and work your way up. And now you are a starter after just 2 months. Like I said, I get it. It's our wide receiver position's not that competitive, but that's still pretty impressive to do that.
Couple things that stand out to me. One, I think it shows us that this is Tim Lester's offense. He's calling the shots. A lot of times in past, you wouldn't see a Kamari Moulton. Even if LaShawn Williams is hurt, LaShawn would still be on that one line. Yeah. A freshman on the depth chart, a guy like Jacob Gill coming in and being on number one on the line right away. I think that shows that, one, like I said, it's Tim Lester's offense, and two, that maybe this offense is a little more not that it's not complex, but maybe easier to learn from a pro perspective and more player friendly, which I guess that would be the hope, and that would be an awesome change. And then you alluded a little bit ago about the offensive line. I think a comment that Kirk made that left me encouraged and excited is that there's a set five. When is the last time we've heard that? Yeah. On the offensive line, where he has the five guys that he's riding into the season with. Now, he said there's two guys with Nick DeYoung and Tyler Ellsbury that are backups that are more than capable, but actually having the five starters and one going into the season healthy is huge. So I'm looking for a big jump there. I said last year I was excited about the line. It just wasn't consistent. And so I think there's a lot of starts and a lot of veteran presence a lot across this line. And so I think there's reason to be excited.
Kind of the, as it's already been said, kind of the splashiest of them all is the Kamari Moulton move up to RB1 line. He must have had a hell of a camp, and LaShawn's nagging injury lead or helped a little bit with that maybe, but obviously being, a freshman, like you gotta play well. So he definitely probably earned that. And then, Cade ends up being the QB1, right? It was rumblings of a possible, battle. And obviously Cade won that battle. So I don't think it's the end of Sullivan. I think we still see him. The hope is you get to see him here in week one, whether it's in mop up duty or, some people even think like you could see him in the second half, but it'll be interesting. I think otherwise the skill position guys you guys have touched on, wide receiver, hopefully see a lot of guys play on Saturday too. So that's the hope.
And we're going back to this running back position. I think Kamari Moulton's one of those guys that, we get excited because you hear Tim Lester in interviews talk about Aaron Jones, and it's like, well, okay. That comparison's awesome. But Kirk has said many times that all three, and he said it today, that all three guys are going to play. They're all going to get carries. Yeah. And it's something I'll touch in my 3 bold predictions coming up here. But I think all three guys are capable Big Ten running backs that would play at a lot of teams. And so I'm excited that we have depth there. And even behind them, the Jazz Pattersons of the world. I mean, how many times, Jazz could play at some other schools. That keeping this room together has been a really great job by Liddell Betts. And the last thing I'll touch on, going back to Tyler's comments about the QB, is I know a lot of us this earlier in the summer with Cade's struggles and everything. I think as a coach, you have to give Cade that chance to go out and prove himself. You see it. He's a leader among the locker room. He's a captain. Yeah. Players believe in him, and the guy has not been healthy in almost 2 years at Iowa. If he's healthy, give him a shot to go play against real competition and let him settle it out there. Now, if we get 2 games into the season a game into the season and it's not looking good, like there has to be a competition there and there has to be some real questions. But how much better off are we this year going into the season with Cade and Brendan as our quarterbacks than last year? If Cade goes down or Cade can't go, like, not that I think Brendan would set the world on fire, but we have a capable backup. And so I think, I think there's so many media people out there that tend to jump on Kirk about this whole Cade thing, but I think it's a locker room thing as well. Cade's a locker room guy. He's a leader. And I think you got to give him that chance to go out and try to lead his team.
I think it's nice too, having like a guy like Tim Lester as a quarterback's coach, as offensive coordinator, because I really feel like if there is struggles with Cade, I do think that they are going to be more willing to, like, hey, let's bring in Sullivan. I don't understand the dynamic last year with everything, or even go back to 2 years ago where, Petrus was struggling big time. And yes, like Padilla wasn't very good. I get that. But it was getting to the point where it's like, okay, can we just try something different? Like, clearly this isn't working. Or like last year, Deacon Hill, clearly this isn't working. And it makes you wonder if like Lester was there last year. Like, I really feel like at some point we probably would have seen Marco in there.
To be honest with you, when we think about the last couple years and how everything was structured on the offensive side of the ball, it actually feels like it's a joke. I went back and listened to our podcast last year before the predictions, and I'll put on record right now, we were all very wrong. We all felt that the offense made actual changes and that our offense was in a great spot. As we all know, that wasn't true. There was zero changes. And it just kind of felt like a joke. And Colin, I agree with you. I think that Lester comes in now as a quarterback's coach, a legit quarterback. He played quarterback in college, that this guy knows what he's doing. If Cade's not capable, Cade's not doing his thing, I don't think he'll hesitate to bring in Brendan, but I also think he can coach up the quarterbacks. Yeah. And so if Cade is struggling,
exactly,
he will actually make sure and try to figure out, okay, why is he struggling? Is it footwork? Is it mechanics? Is it an accuracy thing? Is it a confidence thing? Like, this is Lester's thing. Like, Lester has grown up, has been through the coaching profession, coaching quarterbacks. He knows what he's doing, where the last 6 years has frankly, like I said, has been a joke.
How anyone can defend that, I don't get it.
And to go off your point a little bit, and like, making it not be the same old like it was under Brian. I mean, you're already kind of seeing that with these moves in the depth chart, right? I mean, it's already different. So I can't imagine what it's actually going to look like on the field with the scheme and everything like that too.
I will say my favorite thing that I loved out of Tim Lester's opening presser back in February, he talked about flexibility and about certain guys do things differently and trying to figure out what they do best. And that's what I love too, because I felt like with Brian, it didn't matter who was back there. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. Like, I know Deacon Hill was not good, but like, I don't know, find something that he might be good at and do that instead of just, doing the rollouts with him. Like, why are we doing that with them? Like, what are we doing? Zero
flexibility. And I think it's hard. It's probably not worth our time because it stresses us all out thinking about last year, but in the last couple years under this offense, but just moving forward, hearing a coach that will talk about one, he talked in the Big Ten Network days about how he's not seeing enough explosive plays. Like, that's like music to our ears. That's all we've wanted, was a coach that at least wants to acknowledge that explosive plays help an offense go downfield, help an offense keep the defense honest so they're not stacking the box. Like, this guy, I think, knows what he's doing. Now, I caution fans, I caution us to, like, I think there's going to be growing pains, and then we should fully expect growing pains. But if we can come out on Saturday, show some of these new wrinkles, establish the run, which I fully expect our run game to look. I don't think our run game will be the issue. It's our passing game that's going to need to kind of get some stuff figured out, and I think that's going to be a work in progress. So I think us as fans need to be okay with that and realize that it's not just something that's going to be clicking on all cylinders right away. Now, and sorry if I'm cutting you guys off, but Kirk has said it's gotten better, and I think that from what we've read, things have started to click a little more, not as many mistakes. Quarterbacks are feeling more comfortable. And so I think it's going to be great for the players to get out on Saturday to start facing real competition. And so I'm excited to see what he comes out with. I can't wait for all the bitching and moaning on that first 3 and out. But It's
hopefully it's not the first drive.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm Tim Wester on that first drive, I think you come out, committed to establishing the run. So let's see, show the fans what you've been saying about the offensive line being a consistent unit and pushing it down a throat of an FCS opponent. I think you go out, you establish the run, you start with your three guys, get them involved early, which allows Cade to kind of take some pressure off, settle in, maybe take some shots downfield, and get that passing game working. But I think you're going to see Saturday probably for a lot of the game, like it's going to be a run heavy thing. And I'm excited to see the scheme that Wester's worked up in that run game.
Well, I told Tyler this the other day, going back to last year, Utah State game, I kind of forgot, but we did not run the ball very good that day. And I remember kind of walking out of Kinnick kind of feeling like, oh boy, like we could not establish the run against a Utah State team. And as the year went on last year, we got a little bit better, but it still wasn't good. So it was kind of signs to come. So if we can come out on Saturday and establish that run game and look pretty dominant in that area, even if the passing game doesn't look that good, I'm not feeling that bad about things. Yeah. It's like, okay, we can build off the run. Look at what Georgia Tech did against Florida State. They ran the football. The coach said at the end with the presser, I thought that was hilarious.
Run the ball.
Yeah. And so you get that set up and other things will come at some point. So I guess
I think last year, going back, I now you've got me curious. You can keep talking. I want to go back and look what our yards per
well, you can do that.
Play was against Utah State.
I figured since we are kind of getting into that first game, we might as well jump into that game. I was going to do final predictions or season predictions in the middle and then go to that game, but let's just do that. So I'm going to do the 2-minute drill here where I am just going to pretty much go through Illinois State's team in under 2 minutes for everybody listening. So you have a good idea of what is to come this Saturday. I'm going to do it very quickly here. And so while I'm doing that, Kolby, you can look that up and we can go from there.
I looked it up. So if you had to guess, what do you think we ran? What was our yards per play in that game against Utah State?
Well, it was
2.8.
Yeah, it was like it was 2 point something. I know that.
2.4.
Yeah, 2.4. That's not good against
we
a
left
team like that
game feeling terrible about our run game because of that. We
felt decent with the passing game, though. I mean, sort of decent that day.
Sort of. I think if Iowa can get 4.5 yards per run on Saturday, Saturday, we leave that stadium. You guys leave that stadium. I leave feeling great about where our offense can go. So, and obviously it's against an FCS opponent, but there's no reason we can't be in that 4.5, 5 yards per play. 5 yards per carry thing.
So let me do the 2-minute drill quick here so people know kind of what we're facing with Illinois State, and then we'll get a little bit more into this game and then give our prediction. So, all right, last meeting was 2015. Iowa beat them 31-14. Hawks went on to finish 12-0 that year. Hopefully history repeats itself. Last year, Illinois State was 6-5, including 4 losses to ranked opponents, FCS level. They do bring back plenty of talent from last season, but they have lost 3 straight FBS foes, including 2 years ago against Wisconsin. They lost 38-0. Offensively, they returned 7 starters on offense that ranked 12th in scoring in the FCS. They do have a quarterback competition. Tommy Rittenhouse appeared in 8 games last year, 2 starts, and completed 67% of passing for 467 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Or they will go with Kansas State transfer Jake Rubley, a former 4-star who was recruited by Iowa. Leading the way will be running back Mason King, had 983 yards with 14 touchdowns. They also returned 3 out of their 4 pass catchers from a year ago, including 1 All-American wide receiver that had close to 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. And then offensive line, they returned 3 out of the 5, plus also 2 FBS transfers, 1 from Duke and the other from Minnesota. And then defensively, they returned 8 out of their 9 top tacklers on defense that ranked 22nd in points per game and 27th in yards per game. One of their top defensive players in the FCS is on that team, All-American linebacker who had 14 tackles for loss last year. And then they also have their other 2 linebackers back. So their linebacking core is definitely their strength on defense. Defensive line, they returned 2 starters along with a transfer from Washington State. And then in the secondary, they return 3 starters that ranked 34th in the FCS in passing yards. So that is a 2-minute drill. I think for me, I think this is a good opponent to start the year off because I'm not saying that this is a good team, but it's not like a horrible team either. I mean, they have a decent defense. They have some playmakers on offense. We got to get prepared for the next week with Iowa State. So I think this is a good team to face in week 1.
ultimately, like you said, yeah, it's going to be I go back and forth here. It should be a game that Iowa has no problem with, but it's an opponent that should give Iowa a chance to, play some real competition, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
Iowa should have no problem winning this game. This isn't like South Dakota State a couple years ago where we didn't score a touchdown. That team was one of the best teams in the FCS. That team won the national championship that year. But it should give Iowa a good, way to kind of get the gears grinded and going and getting them firing on all cylinders. I think, like you said, it's a chance for Iowa to play a defense that has returning starters, players that have played at a high level. And I think it bodes well for Iowa at the end of the day.
Yeah, I really think this game, against an FCS opponent, just it comes down to the trenches, right? Like most games. I really think Iowa obviously has the edge. Offense, defensive line should be able to control that and really establish the run game, like we were talking about, like Kolby had mentioned, get into that 4.5, 5 yard mark, and really feeling good about the run game coming out of this game. And then honestly, like passing wise, it's not like I'm looking at like what did Cade throw for? How many touchdowns did he have? Right? It's the efficiency. I think that's what we talk about every single year when it comes to an Iowa quarterback is can he be efficient? And it'd be awesome to see him get off to that great start throwing the ball against Illinois State. And then honestly, like just third down efficiency. Can we sustain drives and actually score points instead of punting as much as we've seen all last year?
I mean, you have to remember with FCS teams, and this is usually the reason, is their depth is lacking so much FCS level that by the third quarter, fourth quarter, you should be able to just lean on them. And that's kind of when you should kind of be at that time where you kind of blow them out. Usually, and you go back to that Western Michigan game last year, it was a pretty close game in the first half. And then, you get to the second half, you start wearing them out a little bit and you start just kind of breaking them down. And the next thing you know, it's, wow, we have 40 points and that's 40 to whatever the final score was, 40-10 or whatever like that. So, also Kolby, we were talking before about like the first drive. I was telling Tyler the other day, like, cause we were trying to think of like, okay, I wonder what the first play will be. And I think it will be a run game or a run play, I should say. But I think it's going to be like a run play that we have never seen before, just to kind of get the juices going for everybody. I really do think that. I don't know what it's going to be, but I think it's going to be a specific run play that we've never actually ran before.
I already have predicted exactly what that run play. It's going to be that Aaron Jones special that he's talking about. It's that running back pitch back cut. I don't know the exact name of that, but it's the Aaron Jones play that guy seems to get 8.5 yards of carry on every time. I think Kamari Moulton will be that guy. I agree with you. Iowa is going to run the ball on the first play, and it's going to be that wrinkle that Tim Lester talked about in camp. I am excited to see it. And really, like, I'm just excited to see what this offense looks like with a different scheme and a different coach running in the scheme and actually calling the plays. Yes. Regardless of how it looks on Saturday, obviously we want it to look great. Like what for us fans watching, like it's been said, it's not any more of us guessing like last year where we went on this podcast last year and said, well, we think that there's wholesale changes. Now we just have to see it. Like, we have brought in a whole new system. Tim Lester is running his offense. And I think that's why I'm like sitting here giddy about what Saturday could look like, even if it's going to be a little rough at times. Like we're getting to see something finally new.
Finally different.
Because worst case scenario, like you said, if there's ups and downs, it's already
at least it's different.
Like, it's already better because it was so bad before. You couldn't get worse.
And listen, we could come on here Sunday and be disappointed. And who knows what happens, but I'm excited. And I think that we're at a position where, Kirk I think we're seeing has kind of given the keys to Tim to do whatever he wants to do. Mm-hmm. And having a guy that has spent some time in the NFL, has learned from that Shanahan tree, is going to apply a lot of that. And from what we've read online, Brad Heinrichs has said we're one of the few programs in college ball that are running this sort of offense, which it's like, wow, that's kind of crazy to hear. But I think we need to be excited. I think we need to give Tim Lester a chance, and I think we need to rally behind the guy because, he kind of walked into a situation where I don't know who would want to be a coordinator at Iowa, and so Tim everything up into this point has been, has been perfect in what he has done. Now he has to go out and show it. But like just the way he talks, the way he's talked about how he wants to implement, he's hasn't been afraid to say, hey, last year Iowa motioned on 6% of the plays. That is not something we're doing going forward. Like
Yep.
knowing that he's committed to trying to make the offense the best it can be is exciting for all of us.
Do you think Illinois State will come out and load the box? Because just from previous, might as well do it because, who knows if they're actually fully changing.
Pass.
Yeah.
Just make
so
us
like,
pass.
do you think they will, or how do you think they will approach?
I'm sure they will, but the thing is, they don't have a single tape on Tim Wester's offense. So I think it's hard to say.
Besides the spring game and Kids Day, and that's the reason why I remind people when they were freaking out about those 2 days about, it doesn't. It's like, why are we're not going to show much?
Anything.
Yeah. So
I'm sure Illinois State will stack the box. Why wouldn't they? And I think that's something that you have to be prepared for. I still think Tim Wester's, and he has said, like, this offense flows through the run game. So we need to establish the run. Yeah. And so I'm sure they'll stack the box. But do I think we finally have a coach who maybe knows how to attack that better? Yes. Do I think we finally have a coach that maybe isn't stubborn and doesn't care that they're stacking the box? Because here's the mindset of Brian Ferentz, and not that it's wrong. It's that he comes from an offensive line background. It's we are going to keep pounding it until they finally give up. And in this day and age in college football, you can't think like that because defenses have gotten way too smart. You need to, checks and balances. You need to scheme. And Brian Ferentz just was not good at that. So
yeah,
I think Tim Wester's a guy that knows how to scheme. He's shown that at Western Michigan. He's shown that at Syracuse, even though it didn't go as well. I mean, he got his offense. He split that number in half, was a top 65 offense after 1 year. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility for Iowa to, when we talk at the end of the year, say, hey, there's real progress that was made.
All right, our game prediction. You guys can go. Tyler, you can start, or Kolby, you can start, and then we'll get into our final season predictions.
Yeah, there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? It's game one. We're going to see punts. We're going to see, missed passes by Cade. Knock on wood, we might see a turnover by the offense, right? But I think it's going to be better than what we've seen in the past. I think we get off on the right foot, like we had mentioned, establishing the run game, and then Cade getting into a nice rhythm on offense, hopefully being able to convert third downs, and hopefully, pass one up to Luke Lachey in the end zone. So I've got Iowa winning this game 34-7. I got it at 4 touchdowns and 2 field goals.
All right, Vets.
Kolby.
So I need to hold my prediction because part of my 3 bold predictions involved this first game. So
okay. Okay, then don't say it then.
You give your thing, and I'll when we get to our 3 bold predictions, I'll give that.
Okay. I'm gonna say 33-10 is the final score. I think they end up getting a touchdown maybe late in the game. They get a field goal at some point. It always seems like there's always that one drive where we kind of like let the team. Maybe it's the first drive of the game or something like that, scripted play or whatever. They go down the field, but we bend but don't break, kick a field goal. But if we get to 33 points, like that doesn't seem like a lot, but once again, first game, working in a new system, I'm happy with that. Especially if the run game, if we're averaging where we need to be at about 4.5 yards per carry, if not maybe even more against an FCS opponent, I'm really happy. I am going to share also here when we get into the season predictions, a little tidbit by someone that I know that knows someone that that's connected with the program. And he said today, Cade is better right now, but Sullivan is not far behind. He said running game is looking really good, consistently getting 5 to 6 yards on first down compared to 0-ish or negative last year. Scheme attacks aggressive defenses that shoot gaps, and we'll have plenty of explosives against those defenses. Iowa's D plays blocks instead of shooting gaps, so they limit big plays, but we're still getting solid chunks. A little thin at D tackle depth, which is a little concerning. Kids Day was defense's best charted practice of the camp and offense's worst.
I mean, hey, I'll take that all day.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Kids Day the offense was horrible and everyone was freaking out and the defense looked phenomenal. So it makes sense that it was one of what defense is best and offense is worse. And let's hope the offense, doesn't look like what they did on that day.
The one thing that with all these tidbits that come out, whether it's, this person that just gave me this or, on the message boards, David Eichel, Sean Bach, or some, Brad Heinrichs, one consistent thing that we just keep hearing is the run game. Like every single time we hear a tidbit, it's always about the run game, like looking good. And I told Tyler, like the spring game and Kids Day, both those, like it was consistent. Like it looked pretty good. Yeah. And so that's what I'm excited for. Another person too was like Jacob Gill. Just every single time his name was always in that like paragraph, always in those tidbits. So that's obviously a good sign as well. I guess going back to the depth chart real quick, we didn't really talk about it, but obviously with Caleb Brown being suspended, I'm almost positive come next week, he'll be back in the starting lineup, and I'm sure he'll probably be maybe starting over Jacob Gill by then, because I'm sure that's kind of where he fits at, is kind of where Jacob Gill and Terrell Washington is.
I wouldn't be so sure.
Where would you put Caleb Brown then at?
I think Caleb.
Or do you think he might not start?
I think he's going to be on the 2 line under Jacob Gill. That's my personal opinion. I think from what we've heard, especially coming from Brad Heinrichs, when you asked him on the message boards, I think it's remained to be seen. But, Brad seemed to allude that he hasn't seemed to kick it into the next gear yet. And I think that's something that the coaches are going to push him on. And I think once he takes that next gear, I think he's going to be hard to keep off the field. But it's, for a guy that I think I was expecting more out of him, and I think he needs to kick it into gear. And so hopefully that suspension's a wake-up call, but I don't think going into week 2 that he's going to be the one-line starter. I think it'll be Jacob Gill with Caleb Brown underneath him.
Yeah, well, especially if Gill has a good first game, gets a nice couple catches and things like that. Yeah, I could definitely see that. All right. Final season predictions. What we're going to do to make this really quick, we probably spend maybe 10 minutes and then we'll call it quits, is each one of us, we're going to give 3 bold predictions along then with our record, season ending record. And then we'll kind of dive into, maybe the losses, things like that, but we'll keep it nice and short. We're not going to go game by game because that gets boring. So, Tyler, you go first, Kolby, and then I will finish it off.
Number 1, starting off with the bold predictions, I think Iowa's defense forces 25 or more turnovers this year as compared to about 15 last year. So I think we increased that margin by +10. I really think that's an emphasis for Phil this year. Obviously, how we're nitpicking when we're talking about like how much better can the defense be, but I think that's an area that we can even be better in. And you've seen it in years past. Like when we create a lot of turnovers, we're usually a pretty damn good team, obviously. So that's number 1. Here's my boldest prediction. We're going to beat Iowa State by double digits this year at home. Currently, I think it was a few days ago, we were a 2.5-point favorite. And the reason I say that, and I'm confident right now, and maybe that's a false sense of confidence, I don't really know, but I just know like in years past, every game has been pretty damn close. And we're up 20-3 in that game last year. And we end up winning 20-13 because our offense in the second half, like most games, stalls out, does nothing. If we have a pulse on offense with Tim Lester through 4 quarters, I really feel like we can win by double digits against Iowa State. I really feel that way. And then bold. Number 3, yeah, I know. That's why I said it. Hey, it's
the point that's the point of this.
And then this one's not so bold, but contrary to maybe somebody's popular beliefs out there, this offense, when you look at it, it's going to look similar to years past. A lot of under center, still focused on the run game, still being conservative in certain aspects, with Kirk and stuff. But obviously the hope is that it feels different, and it obviously is better. So I know people talk about with Tim Lester, new offensive coordinator, RPO, what he did at Western Michigan, a lot of shotgun and stuff like that. I don't think we're necessarily going to see a lot of that. I just think the scheme itself is going to be different. There's be different plays, but it's going to look like it has in the past. And then, record prediction. I have Iowa real quick going 10-2. So I've got them starting off with 4-0 with wins against Iowa State and Minnesota, week 2, week 4 there. Feel good about both of those games for different reasons. Like I just mentioned with Iowa State, just if the offense has a pulse. And then Minnesota, I just think we've had that game circled since Cooper DeJean's invalid fair catch signal BS. So I think Kirk's going to have them ready to go in Minneapolis, week 4. And then We got a bye week. I think we're gonna lose to Ohio State. Ohio State, probably the best team in the country. My question is, can we score an offensive touchdown against them? Like, can we do something on offense to come out of that game feeling like, hey, we had a bye week. We actually, accomplished something. So, but at that point, we're 5-1. We go on another 4-game win streak with some big wins, at Michigan State, home against Washington, Northwestern, Wisconsin. And then I, as of right now, I got a slipping up against UCLA at UCLA. And reason being, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, it's short week, games on a Friday night. I know UCLA is not supposed to be that great of a team this year, but it's an unfamiliar opponent and you're traveling all that way on a short week. I just don't love that spot for Iowa. And then, to finish the season, we have 2 more wins against Maryland. And, everyone thinks is a better and much improved Nebraska team. So long story short, 10-2.
Does that get Iowa into the playoff?
That's the question, right? I mean, you got Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State.
I think Iowa needs to go 11-1. I really do.
I don't think it's good enough to get the Big Ten championship. So I don't know. Can the Big Ten get 4?
I think it all depends on how we look against Ohio State. If we go 10-2, but get blown out by Ohio State, we are not making it in because the committee is going to look at Iowa and be
there
like,
is
no.
that sense of like,
but if we actually make, yes.
Iowa's
especially
and
the offense. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
If we go 11-1, I do think we will probably make it. If we go 11-1, our only loss is
I would
State.
agree.
So my first prediction, this goes to the first game, and this is my bold prediction, is I think Iowa scores 42 points on Saturday. I think that they get there by scoring 5 rushing touchdowns on the day and 1 passing touchdown from Cade McNamara. I think we're going to see Saturday Iowa, like I said earlier, really committed to that run and establish a run game early, which I think will ultimately prevail against an FCS opponent. So my prediction is Iowa scores 40 points for the first time since playing Western Michigan last year. And so, yeah, we'll check back in on that Sunday. That one's going to be figured out real soon.
Yep.
My second bold prediction, and I know a couple of people have predicted this throughout the media, but I think Iowa ends the year going back on rushing with 2,000-yard rushers. I think that Caleb Johnson and either Kamari Moulton or LaShawn Williams get to 1,000 yards. I think you go back to 2016 where LaShawn Daniels and Akram Wadley both finished the season with 1,000 yards behind a veteran offensive line. I think that's something attainable for Iowa this year, especially based on the schedule that we have. Third and final bold prediction, and I told Whitey this the other night, I think Sebastian Castro wins the Jim Thorpe Award for best defensive back in college football.
I like that one a lot.
I think that the guy was very undervalued last year. It was a crime that he was 3rd team All Big Ten. I arguably think he was the best cornerback, defensive back in the Big Ten last year and in the country. You go back and look at this guy's stats, and it's unreal. The guy's great. And so I'm extremely excited for Sebastian Castro, and I think he shows that this year, and I think that the media and people finally start to take notice. And then going on record, I want so badly to say 11-1, but I think I need to go with 10-2. I think we lose at Ohio State. Like you said, I think we start the year 4-0 and then go on to lose to Ohio State. And then my prediction is instead of losing to UCLA, I think we win that game. I think obviously we'll get a week break, but we have to then go all the way back to the East Coast. And I think we drop the game at Maryland, which sets up a huge game with Nebraska on Black Friday. I think Nebraska is a team that could be maybe 9-2 at that point or whatever their record would be. And so that's my prediction. I think Iowa got 10-2. Is probably the 14th team in the country and gets left out of the playoff, unfortunately. If Iowa's 11-1, I think there's no doubt they'll be in the playoff.
The thing that gets me with like end of the year, like UCLA or Maryland, it's like usually that's when Iowa's playing their best, like in November football. My 3 bold predictions, and mine aren't really that bold. The first one is Iowa will average right at or above 4.5 yards per carry. However, I do think the passing game is going to be still behind. There's going to be growing pains. There's going to be times of frustration, but we have to remember, it's year 1. But the running game, I am very, very, very bold on that. I just think it's going to be really good. Cade will be the starter this entire year. unless there is an injury. I think that's really the only way. I really do. But I do think we will still see Sullivan in some games. There'll be certain packages where we'll bring him in for maybe a couple plays for one drive. I do think that. Number 3, Iowa's defense will be as good, if not better, last year, but they will give up more points per game. Last year, we gave up only 14.8 points per game, but we were playing in the Big Ten West, which wasn't very good offensively. This year, you're playing a good Iowa State team with a good offense. You're playing Ohio State. You're playing Washington. I know they're kind of a new team, but you have their coach who's more of an offensive-minded coach. You got year 2 with Fickle up at Wisconsin, UCLA with Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator, and then Nebraska with Dylan Raiola. So we're going to be playing a little bit better offenses this year. Not saying it's going to be like, oh my gosh, but it definitely will be a little bit better. And so I do think we're going to give up some more points per game, but I do think this defense is going to be just as good, if not better. And then my record, 10-2 as well. I know we all said 10-2, but definitely Ohio State. And then for me, it's like, I really don't know. Like, I don't know what the loss is going to be, because I could see it being UCLA or Maryland, like I just said, but at the same time, we play so good in November where it's like, I don't know if that's going to be the case. Is it maybe Wisconsin at home? Do we kind of slip? Is that one of those games where we kind of go in thinking, oh yeah, we feel really good. And then it's like, how do we lose that game? Because there's always that one game where it's like, man, how the hell do we lose that game? Is it more early in the season? Is it us, Iowa State? I hate to say it, but could it be them? Could it be Minnesota, our first true road game of the year? So one of those games, I just think we're gonna lose. It's gonna be a game where we're gonna look back and it's like, man, like every year. Last year was Minnesota. 2 years ago was Purdue, and also like maybe you could even say Nebraska. Every year, it's always that one game where you just look back and you're like, man, how did we lose that game? We should have had no business losing it. So 10-2 and left out of the playoffs. So,
well, I think we're all aligned. I think the stars will have to align for Iowa to go. If Iowa goes 11-1, I think we all feel confident that a playoff berth is in reach. Not that 10-2 doesn't mean it's in reach. I think that's just, you open the can of worms of a lot of other stuff needing to happen. Does the SEC get 4 teams or 5 teams in like Nick Saban thinks? If that's the case, there ain't no way that Iowa's getting to the playoff. So yeah. I think a lot depends on how the rest of the college football landscape shakes out.
Well, that will do it for this episode. Time is running out. I think we kept it at a pretty consistent base, but we are finally here. We are back. We'll have this out sometime Wednesday, and by then we're coming up on less than 3 days away from Hawkeye football. So that will do it for this episode. We'll be back on Sunday to go over the game on Saturday. Till then, have a good rest of your week, and go Hawks.